My stepdad changed all the locks at midnight. He said, "Your mother signed the papers. This isn't your house anymore." I stood on the front porch in my pajamas holding my phone and keys, staring at Dennis through the window beside the door. He had this satisfied smirk on his face while he held up a folded document pressed against the glass. My hands were shaking because I'd just gotten home from my shift at the diner where I worked weekends, and now I couldn't get into my own house. "What papers? What are you talking about?" Dennis tapped the document against the window. "Quit claim deed. Your mother transferred the house to me this afternoon. You're not a resident here anymore." He was lying. He had to be lying because Mom would never sign away our house without telling me. This was the house where I grew up, where Dad lived before he died 3 years ago, where every room held memories Dennis had no right to touch. "Where's my mom? Let me talk to her right now." Dennis shook his head slowly. "She's asleep. Doctor gave her something for her nerves after signing everything. She was pretty emotional about it." My stomach dropped because Mom had been acting strange all week, jumpy and distracted, but I thought it was just stress from her job at the hospital. "You can't just kick me out. I live here. My stuff is inside." Dennis held up a black trash bag I hadn't noticed before. "Got your essentials right here. Clothes, toiletries, your laptop. Rest of it gets donated tomorrow morning." He dropped the bag on the other side of the door. "You've got 5 minutes to get off the property before I call the cops for trespassing." I grabbed the doorknob and tried to turn it, but the lock was completely different now, some kind of electronic deadbolt I'd never seen before. "This is insane. You can't change the locks on our house." Dennis pulled out his phone and started recording me. "Actually, I can. It's my house now. Your mother signed it over voluntarily, and you're currently refusing to leave private property after being asked multiple times." His voice was calm and measured for the recording, nothing like the hostile tone he'd been using seconds before. I looked past him into the living room where I could see Mom's purse on the kitchen counter and her reading glasses on the coffee table where she always left them. Everything looked normal except for the man blocking my entrance and claiming ownership of my entire life. "I'm calling Mom right now." I pulled out my phone and dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. Dennis smiled at me through the window. "Told you, she's sleeping. Phone's off so nobody disturbs her rest." I tried the house phone next, the landline Dad insisted we keep for emergencies, but Dennis had unplugged it from the wall. I could see the cord hanging loose behind the side table. "Let me in right now or I'm calling the police myself." Dennis stopped recording and put his phone in his pocket. "Go ahead, call them. I've got signed legal documents showing ownership. What do you have? A teenage daughter's word against paperwork?" He was 52 years old with gray hair and a beer gut, and he'd been dating Mom for only 8 months. 8 months, and somehow he'd convinced her to sign away the house Dad left us when he died. "I'm 19. I'm not a teenager." Dennis laughed. "Right, 19 years old, working minimum wage at a diner, no college degree. Real impressive. That's exactly why your mother agreed this was necessary." My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Vanessa, asking if I wanted to meet up tomorrow for coffee. I ignored it and pulled up my recent calls to find our family lawyer's number. Dad had used Martin Westbrook for the estate planning after his cancer diagnosis, and Martin's business card was still pinned to our kitchen corkboard inside the house I couldn't enter. I found his office number saved in my contacts from when I'd called about Dad's will 2 years ago. "I'm getting a lawyer. You can't steal someone's house." Dennis pressed his face closer to the window. "Wasn't stolen. Was transferred legally between spouses. Your mother is my wife now as of 6 months ago, remember? Community property laws apply." That wedding had been a quiet courthouse ceremony with just me and Mom's sister Diana as witnesses. Mom said she wanted something simple and intimate, but now I wondered if she'd kept it small so fewer people would ask questions. Diana had seemed uncomfortable during the whole thing, barely smiling in the photos Mom insisted on taking afterward. I dialed Martin Westbrook's emergency line, which he'd given us specifically for situations involving Dad's estate. The phone rang 4 times before going to an answering service. "This is Lillian Crane. I need to speak with Martin Westbrook immediately about my father's property. Someone is trying to take our house." The operator took my information and said Martin would call back within the hour. Dennis was still watching me through the window with that same satisfied expression. "Good luck with that. Everything was done by the book. Had my own lawyer draw up the paperwork, your mother signed it with a notary present, and the deed transfer was filed with the county this afternoon at 4 o'clock. He checked his watch. "Been official for 8 hours now." I picked up the trash bag he'd dropped by the door and looked inside. My work uniforms were crumpled at the bottom along with random clothes that didn't match, my toothbrush, and my laptop. Nothing else. No photos, no jewelry from Dad, none of the important documents I kept in my desk drawer. "You didn't pack any of my actual important stuff. My birth certificate, my social security card, all my documents are in my room." Dennis shrugged. "Not my problem. You've got what you need to survive. Rest of it belongs to the house, which belongs to me." I sat down on the porch steps because my legs felt shaky and I needed to think clearly. The neighborhood was completely dark except for the streetlights, and I could hear dogs barking 3 houses down. My car was parked in the driveway, A 10-year-old sedan Dad bought me for my 18th birthday right before he got too sick to drive anymore. At least Dennis couldn't take that since the title was in my name only. Why are you doing this? What did I ever do to you? Dennis sat down on the other side of the door, both of us separated by glass and new locks. You didn't do anything. That's the problem. Your mother works 60-hour weeks at the hospital while you waste time at that diner making $8 an hour plus tips. She's exhausted and stressed, and you're not contributing anything meaningful to the household. I'd been saving money for community college classes that started in January. I had almost $3,000 in my bank account from 2 years of working every weekend and most weeknights. I give Mom money for groceries and utilities every month, $200 minimum. Dennis laughed again. $200. That doesn't even cover the water bill. You're a financial burden, and your mother finally admitted it. He stood up and stretched. Anyway, this conversation is over. You've got 3 minutes to leave the property. My phone rang and Martin Westbrook's name appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. Martin, someone is trying to steal my house. My stepdad changed all the locks and says my mom signed ownership papers. Martin's voice was groggy but alert. Slow down, Lillian. What kind of ownership papers? I repeated everything Dennis told me about the quitclaim deed and the notary and the county filing. Martin was quiet for a moment. Did your mother sign this voluntarily? Was she coerced or threatened? I looked at Dennis through the window. I don't know. She won't answer her phone. He says she's sleeping and took medication. Martin asked me to hold on while he pulled up county records on his computer. I heard typing in the background and papers shuffling. Okay, I'm seeing a deed transfer filed today at 4:17 p.m. Property at 2847 Meadowbrook Drive transferred from Rachel Crane to Dennis Howell. Single signature from Rachel with notary stamp from someone named Victoria Chen at Mountain View Notary Services. My mother's name was Rachel Crane. She'd kept Dad's last name even after marrying Dennis because she said it felt wrong to change it. Can she just do that? Sign away the house without telling me? Martin sighed. Unfortunately, yes. If she owns the property outright and she's competent to sign legal documents, she can transfer ownership however she wants. The fact that you live there doesn't give you legal rights to the property itself. The porch felt cold through my thin pajama pants. But my dad left that house to her in his will. He wanted it to stay in our family. Martin's voice got gentler. I understand, Lillian. I really do. But once your mother inherited the house, it became hers to do with as she pleased. There's no clause in your father's will restricting her from selling or transferring it. I felt tears starting but forced them back. So I'm just homeless now? That's it? Martin said he couldn't give me legal advice without reviewing all the documents first, but suggested I find somewhere safe to stay tonight and come to his office first thing Monday morning. Bring any paperwork you have access to. If there's evidence of coercion or fraud, we might have grounds to challenge the transfer, but I need to see everything before I can tell you what options exist. I thanked him and ended the call. Dennis was still watching me from inside with his arms crossed. Time's up. Leave now or I'm calling the police. I walked to my car and threw the bag in the back seat, then sat in the driver's seat trying to decide what to do next. Vanessa lived 20 minutes away and her parents were usually okay with me staying over, but showing up at midnight seemed inappropriate even for our close friendship. I finally called Vanessa and explained everything in a rush. She answered on the second ring sounding wide awake. Wait, what? Your stepdad kicked you out of your own house? I repeated the whole story while watching Dennis move around inside closing curtains and turning off lights. Can I stay at your place tonight? Just until I figure out what's happening. Vanessa didn't hesitate. Obviously. Get here now. My parents won't care. I started the car and backed out of the driveway, looking at my house one last time before driving away. Every window was dark now except the porch light, which blinked off just as I reached the corner. Vanessa's house was in a newer development on the north side of town, where all the homes looked identical with brick facades and 2-car garages. Her parents were both awake when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen table in their bathrobes. Vanessa must have called them after we hung up because they already knew what happened. Her mom, Linda, pulled me into a tight hug. We've got the guest room ready. Stay as long as you need. I felt the tears I'd been holding back finally break through. Linda held me while I cried, and Vanessa's dad, Frank, made tea nobody drank. When I finally calmed down enough to talk, I told them everything from the beginning. Frank listened carefully, occasionally asking questions about specific details. Did your mother seem coherent the last time you saw her? Any signs she might have been impaired or not thinking clearly? I thought back to that morning when Mom left for her hospital shift. She'd seemed distracted and anxious, kept checking her phone and jumping whenever it buzzed. She was nervous about something, kept saying she had important errands to run after work. I thought she meant grocery shopping. Frank pulled out his phone and started typing notes. You'll need documentation of everything. When did Dennis first meet your mother? When did they get married? Has he ever shown financial interest in the house before? Any arguments about property or money? I tried to remember specific conversations. They met at the hospital where Mom works. Dennis was there visiting his brother who had surgery. They started dating last year in February, got married in June. The wedding was really quick and small, just courthouse ceremony. Linda sat down across from me. 6 months from dating to marriage is extremely fast, especially for someone your mother's age. Did she explain why the rush? Mom had said she was tired of being alone and Dennis made her happy after years of grief following Dad's death. She said life was too short to wait around when you found someone good. Frank said we needed to document everything immediately while details were fresh. He opened a notes app on his phone and started asking questions. What time did you arrive home tonight? I checked my phone. 11:47 p.m. My shift ended at 11:30 and it's a 15-minute drive. Frank typed it in. What time did Dennis say the deed was filed? I remembered him checking his watch and doing the math. He said 4 p.m. and that it had been official for 8 hours, so I got home around midnight. Frank asked what Dennis said word for word when I first approached the door. I repeated the conversation as accurately as I could remember, including Dennis recording me on his phone and threatening to call the police for trespassing. He recorded you asking to enter your own home? Vanessa looked furious. That's messed up. Frank typed faster. He was building a case, recording you as an unwanted trespasser to justify any future legal action. Very calculated. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Dennis. Your mother wants you to know she loves you, but this decision is final. Don't try to contact her again or we'll file a restraining order for harassment. I screenshot the text and sent it to Frank. He responded immediately. Save every communication. This is evidence of alienation. I tried calling Mom's number again, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message. Mom, it's me. Please call me back. I don't understand what's happening. Dennis won't let me in the house and I need to talk to you. Please. Sleep didn't come until almost 4 a.m., and when I finally dozed off, I dreamed about Dad building the deck in our backyard. I woke up at 9:30 a.m. to sunlight streaming through the guest room window and Vanessa knocking softly on the door. Mom made breakfast if you're hungry. Also, your boss called asking if you're still working tonight. My Saturday shift started at 4 p.m. and I'd completely forgotten about it. Tell her yes, I need the money now more than ever. Vanessa came in with a plate of eggs and toast. Dad says you should call your mom's sister, the one who was at the wedding. She might know what's going on. Aunt Diana was Mom's younger sister and they'd been close growing up, but their relationship got complicated after Diana's messy divorce last year. Diana and Mom haven't been talking much lately. I don't know if she'll help. I ate the eggs while composing a text to Diana. Hi, it's Lillian. Something happened with Mom and Dennis last night. Can you call me when you get a chance? Diana responded within 5 minutes. What happened? Is Rachel okay? I called her instead of texting the whole story. Diana answered immediately, sounding worried. Lillian? What's going on? I explained everything from Dennis changing the locks to the deed transfer to Mom not answering her phone. Diana was silent for so long I thought the call dropped. Diana? You still there? Diana's voice came back shaky and angry. That bastard. I knew something was wrong. Your mother called me last week crying but wouldn't tell me why. She kept saying she had to do something for Dennis and she didn't know if it was right. My chest got tight. She knew about the deed transfer a week ago? Diana said Mom had been vague but mentioned Dennis wanting financial security and feeling insecure about not owning property. He told her that without the house in his name, he felt less committed to the marriage, like she didn't really trust him as a partner. Diana said she'd be at Vanessa's house in 40 minutes. Don't do anything until I get there. We're getting your mother away from that man. After we hung up, I went downstairs where Frank and Linda were reading news on their tablets. Frank looked up when I entered. Your aunt is coming? I nodded and sat at the kitchen table. She said Mom called her last week crying about Dennis wanting financial security. He manipulated her into thinking the deed transfer was about proving trust. Linda looked disgusted. Classic abuser tactic. Make the victim feel responsible for the abuser's insecurity. Diana arrived at 10:30 a.m. driving a silver sedan with a dented front bumper. She burst through Vanessa's front door looking fierce and determined. Diana was 43 years old with short blonde hair and tattoos covering both arms. She pulled me into a crushing hug. I should have stopped this. I should have done more to protect Rachel. We sat in the living room and I repeated everything again while Diana listened with increasing fury. When I finished, she pulled out her phone and tried calling Mom. No answer. She tried 3 more times with the same result. He's got her phone. I guarantee it. Frank asked if Diana knew anything about Dennis's background before he married Mom. Diana shook her head. Rachel kept him separate from the family. We only met him twice before the wedding and both times were quick, awkward dinners where Dennis barely spoke. I told Rachel it was weird how fast they were moving, but she said I was being negative because of my own divorce. Diana suggested going to the house and demanding to see Mom. If Dennis won't let us in, we call the police for a welfare check. Tell them we're concerned about Rachel's safety. We all piled into Diana's car and drove to my house on Meadowbrook Drive. The front looked exactly the same as it had 12 hours ago, except now it was daylight and the neighborhood was awake with people mowing lawns and walking dogs. Dennis's truck was in the driveway next to Mom's car. Diana marched up to the front door and pounded hard enough to rattle the frame. Rachel, open the door. It's Diana. No response. She pounded again harder. I know you're in there. I need to talk to you right now. The door opened and Dennis stood there looking annoyed. She doesn't want to see anyone. Leave before I call the police. Diana pushed past him into the house before he could stop her. Rachel, where are you? I followed Diana inside and saw our living room exactly as I'd left it yesterday morning. Mom's nursing textbooks were still stacked on the coffee table and her favorite blanket was draped over the couch. Dennis tried to grab Diana's arm, but she jerked away. Don't touch me, Rachel! Mom appeared at the top of the stairs wearing her bathrobe with her hair uncombed. She looked exhausted and her eyes were red from crying. Diana, please leave. I can't do this right now. Diana climbed the stairs toward her. Can't do what? Talk to your own sister? Your daughter who got kicked out last night? Mom's face crumpled. I didn't know Dennis was going to do that. He said he'd talk to Lillian calmly and explain the situation. Dennis followed Diana up the stairs. I did talk to her calmly. She's the one who refused to accept reality. I stood at the bottom of the stairs looking up at Mom. You signed away Dad's house without even telling me. How is that calm? Mom started crying harder. I had to. Dennis said if I didn't prove my commitment to our marriage, he was leaving. I can't lose another husband. Diana reached the top of the stairs and grabbed Mom's shoulders. Listen to yourself. He's manipulating you. This isn't love. This is control. Dennis inserted himself between them. This is none of your business. Rachel made an adult decision about her own property. Diana shoved him back. It is my business when my sister is being abused by a con artist who stole her daughter's home. Dennis's expression went cold. Get out of my house right now or I'm calling the police. Frank stepped forward. Actually, I think we should call the police. I have concerns about Rachel's welfare. Dennis pulled out his phone. Fine, I'll call them myself. You're all trespassing. Mom came down the stairs slowly, holding the railing. Please stop. Everyone just stop. She looked at me with devastation in her eyes. Lillian, I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to happen this way. Dennis stood behind her. Rachel, don't apologize. You did what was necessary for our marriage. Diana pointed at him. See? He's controlling what she says right in front of us. Mom shook her head. He's not controlling me. I made my own choice. But her voice wavered when she said it. Linda spoke gently. Rachel, can we talk privately? Just you and Diana and Lillian, please? Dennis answered before Mom could. No. Whatever needs to be said can be said in front of me. I'm her husband. Frank pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police for a welfare check. Rachel appears to be under duress. Mom looked at me with something between guilt and fear in her eyes. Lillian, I'm so sorry, but this is final. Dennis smiled and we had no choice but to leave. Sunday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. The voicemail was from Mom's coworker at the hospital, a nurse named Beverly who'd worked with Mom for 8 years. Lillian, this is Beverly from St. Catherine's. Your mother called in sick this morning and I'm worried about her. She's never missed a shift without at least a week's notice. Can you call me back? I called Beverly immediately, and she answered on the first ring. Thank God. What's going on with Rachel? Dennis called the hospital Friday saying she was taking family medical leave, but she never filed the paperwork. My chest got tight. Dennis did what? Beverly explained that Dennis had contacted the hospital's HR department claiming Mom needed immediate leave for personal health reasons. But Rachel never mentioned anything about health problems. She was here Thursday working a full shift and seemed fine except maybe a little stressed. I told Beverly everything about the deed transfer and Dennis kicking me out. Beverly was silent for a long moment. Oh no, Rachel mentioned Dennis had been pushing her to reduce her hours. She said he wanted her home more, but I didn't realize it was this serious. I asked if Beverly could document Dennis's call to HR and any conversations about Mom reducing hours. It might help our legal case showing he's controlling her life. Beverly agreed immediately. I'll pull her personnel file and make copies of everything relevant. Rachel is a good nurse and a good person. I'm not letting some controlling husband destroy her life. We arranged to meet Monday afternoon at a coffee shop near the hospital. Monday morning, Martin Westbrook called with updates. I reviewed the deed transfer and the notary documentation. Everything appears procedurally correct, but the speed of the transfer and the family circumstances raise red flags. I'm filing for emergency relief based on suspected undue influence. I asked what that meant exactly. Undue influence is when someone uses their position of power or trust to manipulate another person into making decisions they wouldn't normally make. In this case, Dennis used his position as Rachel's husband to pressure her into signing away the house. Martin explained the judge would review evidence of Dennis's behavior and relationship timeline to determine if Mom had truly acted freely. We need to show a pattern of manipulation and control. Diana's testimony about Rachel's emotional state will be crucial. Beverly met me that afternoon with a folder stuffed with copies of hospital records and notes. Everything Dennis did regarding Rachel's employment is documented here. The multiple calls about her schedule, his uninvited visits to the hospital, his requests for financial information he wasn't entitled to. Beverly explained that Mom's supervisor had started keeping detailed notes after the third time Dennis showed up unannounced. We were concerned about safety. Dennis's behavior was escalating. I asked if Mom had ever reported feeling threatened. Beverly shook her head. She kept saying Dennis was just worried about her because she worked too much. She defended him every time we raised concerns. Beverly's documentation went straight to Martin, who added it to our case file. This paints a clear picture of escalating control. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously, and a woman's voice spoke quickly. Is this Lillian Crane? This is Victoria Chen from Mountain View Notary Services. I notarized documents for your mother on Friday. My pulse quickened. This was the notary who'd witnessed Mom signing the deed transfer. Yes, this is Lillian. Why are you calling? Victoria sounded nervous. I've been thinking about that signing all weekend and something felt off. Your mother seemed extremely anxious and kept asking if she could change her mind after signing. I told her once the deed was filed with the county, it would be difficult to reverse. I grabbed my laptop and started typing notes. Did Dennis do or say anything concerning during the signing? Victoria hesitated. He didn't threaten her overtly, but he kept his hand on her shoulder the entire time and answered questions I directed to her. When I asked Rachel directly if she understood what she was signing, Dennis answered yes before she could speak. This was exactly what we needed. Would you be willing to testify to that? We're filing a legal challenge tomorrow. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I could lose my notary license for questioning a signing I already completed and filed, but I can't stop thinking about your mother's face. She looked terrified. I gave Victoria Martin Westbrook's contact information. Please call him. Your testimony could save my mom. Victoria agreed to reach out Monday evening. I've been a notary for 15 years and I've never felt this uncomfortable about a signing. Something was very wrong in that room. I immediately called Martin and left a voicemail about Victoria's call. The notary is having doubts about the signing. She said Mom seemed terrified and Dennis controlled the entire interaction. Martin filed the emergency motion Monday morning and the clerk scheduled a hearing for Wednesday afternoon. 2 days. Judge Anderson must see the urgency. By Wednesday morning, our case was stronger than I dared hope. The notary testimony, hospital documentation, and Diana's statements would show Dennis had systematically manipulated and controlled Mom into signing away the house. Frank drove me to the courthouse at 1:30 p.m. Martin was already there reviewing notes. Process server confirmed Rachel was served this morning at 8 a.m. at your house. Dennis tried to refuse service on her behalf, but the server explained that wasn't legally possible. We entered the courtroom at 1:55 p.m. and I saw Dennis already seated with his lawyer, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit. At exactly 2 p.m., the judge entered and everyone stood. Judge Anderson was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled into a tight bun. We sat back down and the judge reviewed the case file. This is an emergency motion to void a deed transfer between spouses. Mr. Westbrook, you're representing the adult daughter of Mrs. Howell? Martin stood. Yes, Your Honor. Lillian Crane, daughter of Rachel Howell, formerly Rachel Crane. We're arguing the deed transfer was obtained through undue influence and coercion. Dennis's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, this is a clear-cut property transfer between married spouses. Mrs. Howell signed voluntarily with proper notarization. There's no legal basis to reverse it. Judge Anderson looked at Mom's empty seat. Where is Mrs. Howell? She was subpoenaed to appear. Martin explained that Mom had been served but hadn't arrived yet. The judge checked her watch. We'll give Mrs. Howell 15 minutes. If she doesn't appear by 2:15 p.m., I'll issue a bench warrant. At 2:12 p.m., the courtroom doors opened and Mom walked in looking terrified. She wouldn't make eye contact with anyone and sat in the back row. Dennis turned around and stared at her hard. Judge Anderson noticed the interaction. Mrs. Howell, please come forward and be seated in the witness area. Mom walked to the front with her head down and sat in the chair beside the judge's bench. She was shaking visibly. Judge Anderson spoke gently. Mrs. Howell, you were subpoenaed to testify today about a property transfer that occurred last Friday. Do you understand why you're here? Mom nodded without speaking. The judge asked her to speak up for the record. Yes, I understand. Martin stood and approached. Mrs. Howell, can you explain why you transferred your house to your husband Dennis Howell on Friday, November 3rd? Mom's voice was barely audible. He asked me to. Martin pressed further. Why did he ask you to transfer the house? Dennis's lawyer objected, but Judge Anderson overruled. Answer the question, Mrs. Howell. Mom glanced at Dennis and backed down. He said it would show my commitment to our marriage, that I was choosing him over my past. Martin pulled out the hospital documentation. Mrs. Howell, did your husband also ask you to quit your job? Mom looked surprised by the question. He suggested I reduce my hours. He was concerned about my stress levels. Martin showed the judge Beverly's statements. Your Honor, hospital records show Mr. Howell contacted the HR department 6 times in 1 month requesting information about Mrs. Howell's schedule and finances. He also made uninvited visits to her workplace that made staff uncomfortable. Judge Anderson looked interested. I'll allow it. This speaks to pattern of behavior. Martin continued. Mrs. Howell, did you want to transfer the house to your husband? Mom was crying now. I didn't want to lose him. After Rachel's father died, I was so lonely. Dennis said without the house in his name, he didn't feel secure in our marriage. Martin showed her the notary's statement. The notary who witnessed your signature says you seemed frightened and asked multiple times if you could change your mind. Is that accurate? Mom nodded and wiped her eyes. I was scared. The judge leaned forward. Scared of what, Mrs. Howell? Mom looked at Dennis and her whole body tensed. Scared of being alone again. Martin pushed harder. Or scared of your husband? Dennis's lawyer objected loudly, but Judge Anderson was focused on Mom now. Mrs. Howell, I'm going to ask you directly. Did your husband threaten you or coerce you into signing? Mom started crying harder. He didn't threaten me. He just said he'd leave if I didn't prove I trusted him. The judge sat back. That's coercion, Mrs. Howell. Threatening to end the marriage unless you surrender property is textbook undue influence. Dennis's lawyer tried to object again, but the judge held up her hand. I've heard enough. Mr. Howell, stand up. Dennis stood slowly, his confident expression finally cracking. Judge Anderson looked at him with disgust. You systematically isolated your wife from her support system, monitored her workplace, controlled her finances, and coerced her into signing away property she inherited from her deceased husband. Then you kicked her 19-year-old daughter out of her home at midnight with a trash bag of belongings. The judge's voice got harder. This court will not enable financial abuse. The deed transfer is voided effective immediately. The property at 2847 Meadowbrook Drive is returned to Rachel Crane. Dennis's face went red. You can't do that. We're married. That's our house. Judge Anderson's expression was steel. The house belonged to Mrs. Crane before your marriage and will continue belonging to her. You have no legal claim to it. She turned to Mom. Mrs. Crane, I'm ordering your husband to vacate the property within 24 hours. If he refuses, law enforcement will remove him. The judge signed an order and handed it to the clerk. This property transfer is void. The house is returned to Rachel Crane immediately. Dennis Howell is ordered to return all keys, garage door openers, and access codes within 24 hours. If he attempts to contact Rachel or Lillian except through legal counsel, I'll issue a restraining order. Martin thanked the judge and we were dismissed. Mom sat frozen in the witness chair while Dennis stormed out of the courtroom with his lawyer. I approached Mom slowly. Are you okay? She looked at me with devastation and relief mixed together. I'm so sorry, Lillian. I was so stupid. I let him manipulate me into hurting you. I hugged her tight. It's over now. We can fix this. Diana burst into the courtroom and grabbed Mom, holding her while they both cried. You're safe now, Rachel. He can't hurt you anymore. We drove back to the house in separate cars. Dennis's truck was already gone from the driveway. Mom unlocked the front door with shaking hands and we walked into the living room. Mom collapsed on the couch, sobbing. I was so blind. He took everything from me and I let him. Diana sat beside her. He targeted you when you were vulnerable. That's what abusers do. Over the next few hours, Mom explained how Dennis had systematically isolated her. First suggesting she didn't need to see Diana so often because family drama was stressful. Then discouraging her book club because those friends were bad influences. Then monitoring her phone and questioning every text message. It happened so gradually I didn't realize I'd lost control of my entire life until it was too late. Frank helped me change the locks back to normal ones. We found Dennis had also installed cameras in 3 rooms that we immediately removed. He was watching everything, Mom said quietly. Every conversation, every movement. I felt like a prisoner in my own house. The next day, Beverly came by with flowers and news that Mom's job was secure. We put you on temporary leave, not termination. You can return whenever you're ready. Mom thanked her through tears. Slowly, Mom's support system rebuilt itself. Friends she'd lost contact with during Dennis's control started calling and visiting. Diana came over every day to check on her. I moved back into my room and unpacked the trash bag of belongings Dennis had thrown together. Martin called with final updates. Dennis signed papers agreeing not to contest the judge's order. He's not getting the house back. Mom started therapy the following week to process the trauma of Dennis's manipulation. She admitted she'd been so desperate to not be alone after Dad died that she'd ignored every red flag. I thought I needed a husband to be complete. I forgot I was already complete on my own. 3 months later, Mom was back to her old self, working full-time at the hospital, attending book club, and spending time with friends Dennis had driven away. She apologized to me constantly for putting me through that nightmare. I almost lost you because I was too scared to be alone. I'd enrolled in community college for the spring semester, living at home and saving money exactly as originally planned. My relationship with Mom was stronger because we'd survived Dennis together. One Saturday afternoon, we were having coffee on the deck Dad built when Mom got a call from an unknown number. She answered cautiously and her expression changed to shock. She put the call on speaker. It was a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit. Mrs. Crane, we're investigating Dennis Howell for fraud. It appears he's done this before to at least 3 other women. Married them quickly, manipulated them into signing over property, then moved to the next victim. Mom's hands shook. 3 other women? The detective explained they'd found a pattern going back 10 years. Dennis would target recently widowed women with property, romance them quickly, isolate them from support systems, and take their assets through coercion or fraud. You're actually lucky. Most of his victims never recovered their property because he was better at covering his tracks. Your daughter's quick legal action saved you. The detective asked if Mom would be willing to testify in the criminal case they were building. We want to make sure Dennis Howell never does this to anyone else. Mom agreed immediately. Whatever you need, I'll do it. A year after that midnight lockout, I sat on Dad's deck with my acceptance letter to a 4-year university. Full scholarship for academic achievement. Mom read it over my shoulder with tears in her eyes. Your father would be so proud. The house Dennis tried to steal was still ours, and we were stronger for having fought to keep it. Thanks for watching till the end.